440 microns, and which is quite small. It's about a 90th of an inch, which is the lion's share of the material that's in whatever comes off your roof. Dead birds, whatever. My big problem in my house were the seeds off the elm trees, because they put out billions of them, and they go right through the screen guard that I have on my roof, and they clog up everything else if you try and stop them. So the other thing that the pre-filter does is it's designed with a mechanism through the way that the filter itself is designed, so it aerates the water and adds a large amount of oxygen to the water, which helps in the purification and the stability of the water itself. So when the water comes out of the pre-filter, which is step 1, it goes to the step 2, which is something that no one ever told me about except for the Germans, and now I'm hoping that it's becoming more widely adopted, is this idea of a calming inlet. And the concept is that if you have the water crashing in from the surface of your tank, it will hit the water much like if you held a garden hose over your head. And what that does is anything that's in the tank, which there will not be much if you use a pre-filtration system like this, it will stir up all the water in the tank and all the sediment, and you'll have the water will go turbid. And I have had many more than one person come up to me and said, well, after a big rain, my bath water's brown. Well, the reason is it's going in and it's stirring up all the stuff in the tank, and then they turn on the pump, and the filters can't handle all that material, and they get brown water. So you calm the water going in. What that effectively does is it makes all of the agitation occur right here inside this pipe, so that by the time the water comes out at the bottom, there's no more velocity to the water, and it just blooms into the tank. Then the third thing was this concept of a floating filter in order to get the water off 6 inches below the surface. I guess I need to walk around so everybody can see. 6 inches below the surface. This graphic, it should have a little more hose, but the idea is you don't want to get the water off the bottom, because I guarantee you the water on the bottom is the dirtiest. Anybody that's left iced tea on the counter overnight, you'll see the lemon floating on the surface, and there'll be the clear layer of water, and then it'll be progressively darker as you get to the bottom. The same thing happens in your tank. Now, the other thing about this whole operation of calming the water is that the tank itself will become a sedimentation filter, because in between rain events, there's very, very little movement of the water within the tank, only the water that's drawn out. And so the rest of the material will continue to settle and settle and settle. Now, the amount of material that actually gets into the tank is not really a problem. This is a little bit like, well, the tank will actually form a biofilm all along these surfaces here. And the biofilm on the bottom will actually help mineralize the particles that get into the tank, which will geometrically reduce their volume. So, for instance, I got into one of my tanks because I was having to retrofit it because I didn't start out like this after 5 years. And there was only enough sediment in the bottom to make what I would call something along the lines of footprints in a dusty warehouse floor. That was all there was. There wasn't any kind of buildup that would ever need to be cleaned. When I first consulted people about this, they said, oh, you just clean out your tanks every 3 to 5 years. And I knew right off that that was not a solution I wanted to go for. I thought 700 or 800 pounds of wet stuff that has to go through a 12-inch hole that's a foot and a half over my head. I mean, you know, I'm out of town that weekend. I'm not around. So anyway, so we've got all this biofilm growing, and you think, wow, you know, that's not good. Well, actually it is, because it's not necessarily what's in the water, it's the water you get out of the tank. There was actually I've taken Scientific American for 40 years, and one of my favorite parts of it is the part that's 50, 100, and now 150 years ago today, and they had this article about an English nobleman that was in India, and he went up into the mountains and he saw the natives getting the water out of this tank, and it had plants growing in it and little things swimming around in it, and the water was kind of tinged green, and he said, get all that out of there, that's bad, you know, get it out. And so they cleaned it all out. Well, 2 weeks later they couldn't drink the water. So, throw it all back in there, it worked for 100 years, you know, it'll keep working now. So the point is that it's not necessarily what's in the water, it's the water you get out of your tank. Because the only way to really control the biofilm is to chlorinate your tank. And in my view, that's counterproductive to the whole concept. Most people are trying to get rid of the chlorine because of all the problems that Chlorine is one of the great health victories of the 21st century, that and probably dental care. But the Europeans consider chlorine to be too dangerous to use, so they don't even use chlorine. There's a lot of things that go on in our chlorinated water that people are now becoming aware of. Now, whether or not they're real or they'll be proven, some of them are in fact real. And I've got some letters from a public water supplier that were quite interesting. They were drawing it out of a lake on the Highland Lakes. And they had a big flood and they had a whole bunch of organic material. So they had to add extra chlorine. Well, they forgot to add a chemical that was supposed to take out what the chlorine made. And what happens is when the chlorine attacks the biologicals, it breaks them down and will form compounds called trihalomethanes. Well, they're known carcinogens, and the TCEQ has a limit as to how much of the trihalomethanes that you can have in your water. Well, they went way over the limit. So they sent out this letter that said, well, we've gone way over the limit, and the TCEQ says that it's dangerous, so we have to send you this letter. But the water is safe to drink, and if you have any problems about these carcinogens in your water, talk to your doctor. And that was how they left it. And I thought that was just so beyond, it was a little hard for me to relate to all of that. I thought, if your water's bad, just say it's bad. And then the other thing I liked, what the city of Austin occasionally will come out, well, your water smells bad, but it's not bad for you. I'm like, okay, well, that's good to know. But anyway, so then we got all that done where we got the water stabilized in the tank where it doesn't churn itself. We're taking the water off the top. We've now kind of come to the fourth step, which is whatever gets into your tank is either going to sink or float. So I call them floaters and sinkers, because there's very few things that are actually neutrally buoyant. Over time, they're going to go to the top or the bottom. Well, we've already talked about what happens to the stuff on the bottom. The stuff on the top, some pollens and other things that might get in there, can form a sheen of water over the surface. And over time, it can block the interaction of the air with the water in the tank. So the whole idea about how you keep the water clean and pure in your tank and keep it stable is to have oxygen in it. That's why we're oxygenating the water highly through our prefiltration, and we're keeping these channels will continue to let air get in and out of the tank. And generally the tanks will have a vent, although this tank does not show that, so that you'll have some air circulation in the tank. So what happens is we try and develop I probably should have asked about a laser pointer. On the way this is cut is fairly important to have it at an angle. The reason is that if the water has to break the surface tension on an even dimension the whole way around, it can build up. And you watch the water, that's why you can float a pen or a needle on water, it's just a surface tension. And it'll build up and eventually create a layer of crud that can give you a problem. But if you make the outlet a little higher than the highest level of water in the tank and you cut it at an angle, then when the water goes through, it will accelerate when it drops, and whatever particles or whatever there is on the surface will be drawn down like a magnet. It's amazing. I have a little creek that goes through my house, or next to my house. Not, Frank Lloyd Wright or whatever. But anyway, it goes next to my house. And I watch the water a lot because it's very calming. I'll go down there and watch the water go over the dam. It's just amazing when a stick will get across the dam and you pull the stick off, and all of that surface stuff, it looks like it's all just connected. And there's not that much water going across the surface, but it's the surface tension that just draws all that stuff. And the reason that it's doing it is because that water's accelerating and pulling it across on surface tension. So this is a pretty important part as well. And then these little boxes here designate check valves, which is a way to keep mice and mosquitoes and whatever else from coming into your tank from the backside. There was a story of a lady in Hawaii who, I believe it was Hawaii, but anyway, she had a rainwater system, and all of a sudden her water got really bad, and she was like, oh my gosh, I can barely drink this stuff. And then it got okay, and then went along another month, and then it got really bad. So she called somebody out. She says, I'm not going through this again. She called somebody out. They looked inside the tank, and there were 2 cat skeletons. Oh. So we decided 1 cat you can handle, but 2 is too many. So I don't even want to go there. So we make sure that we keep all of that kind of thing out of your tank. And these pre-filters do that. They keep the mosquitoes out, and they keep all that other stuff out. Because, I had a guy that a squirrel fell down his well, and it was months before he could drink the water. So we're about the only thing on the planet that doesn't wake up in the morning and think,